The moment my sister's husband pushed me out of the hall, calling me useless in front of hundreds of guests, I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't the broke outsider they thought I was. I still had access to something powerful, something worth $19 million. By the time the night was over, their laughter turned into silence, and their empire crumbled with just one signature from me. Leko's childhood was filled with silence, not the warm kind, but the heavy silence that comes when no one notices you. From the very beginning, he was the child pushed to the corner while all eyes shined on his sister, Amira. She was the jewel, the pride of the family, the one who could do no wrong. Every little achievement of hers was celebrated with joy. If she sang at school, the whole family came to cheer. If she scored high in class, neighbors were told proudly. But when Leko tried to show something he had done, there was only a distracted nod or a dismissive wave of the hand. Their parents made it clear who they believed in. They paid for Amira's music lessons, new clothes, private school, and even tutors. For Leko, there were no extra lessons, no encouragement, not even a kind word. If he asked for help with homework, he was told to figure it out. If he dreamed out loud, they laughed and reminded him that he was not like Amira. Slowly, those words sank into his heart. He stopped asking, he stopped sharing, and he began to live in her shadow, unseen and unvalued. Family gatherings became a stage for this comparison. Amira would arrive in a bright dress, holding some new award, while Leko stood behind unnoticed, wearing clothes that had been passed down to him. Relatives would pat Amira's head and call her blessed. Then they would turn to Leko and shake theirs, muttering, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" The word stung, but he learned to hide the pain with a forced smile. Even as they grew older, the pattern never changed. Amira was always introduced as the daughter who brought honor to the family, while Leko was either ignored or spoken of with disappointment. Deep inside, he carried a storm, but he never let it out. He told himself that one day, he would find his own light, even if no one believed in him. Though no one saw it, Leko's quietness was not weakness. It was strength building slowly, like fire waiting for air. And while his parents thought they had only one star in the family, they had no idea that the boy they called a disappointment was quietly preparing to rise higher than they could ever imagine. When Amira married Matsi, it felt like the entire family had won a prize. Matsi was rich, charming, and well known in business circles. Their wedding was like a festival, with golden decorations, expensive food, and guests dressed in the finest clothes. From that day, Amira's name shined even brighter in the family. She became the daughter who brought honor and wealth, while Leko was pushed further into the shadows. Their parents walked with their heads high, bragging to neighbors that their jewel had married into greatness. Amira and Matsi lived in a grand house, the kind that people only saw in magazines. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Servants ran around to keep everything perfect, and every room sparkled with luxury. To outsiders, they looked like the perfect couple living the dream. But behind the shine, their pride grew bigger. They believed money gave them power over others, and they treated Leko as if he was lucky just to breathe the same air as them. Every month, they hosted extravagant parties. Guests from all over came to eat, drink, and praise the couple's wealth. Leko was always invited, but never truly welcomed. When he walked into the hall, dressed in his simple clothes, whispers always followed him. Some guests asked if he worked there. Others joked that he came only for free food. Instead of defending him, Amira and Matsi laughed along, enjoying the humiliation. To them, it was entertainment. Leko sat quietly in the corner, ignored by almost everyone. Sometimes, Amira would even send him to run small errands during the party, like fetching drinks or carrying trays. It was clear they didn't see him as a guest, but as someone beneath them. Even his parents, who once should have protected him, joined in the act. They proudly paraded around with Amira, praising Matsi for his wealth, while they avoided standing near Leko as if he was an embarrassment. Each party was the same story repeated: bright lights, loud laughter, and quiet pain for Leko. He swallowed every insult, every mocking smile, and every cold shoulder. On the outside he looked calm, but inside he carried the weight of being treated like a servant in his own family. But what Amira and Matsi never realized was that every moment of humiliation was shaping Leko. Each insult was turning into silent strength. They thought he was powerless, but deep down, he was waiting for the day when all the appearances they worshipped would fall apart, and their pride would no longer shine brighter than the truth. Years before anyone noticed him, Leko had made a choice that changed his life forever. While his family laughed at his small ideas and called him aimless, he had quietly saved the little money he earned from odd jobs. Instead of spending it on clothes or distractions, he placed it into a struggling tech startup run by a young group of dreamers who no one believed in at the time. People mocked the company, saying it would never survive, but Leko saw something different. He saw potential, the same way he wished someone would one day see potential in him. For years, the startup fought hard to stay alive. There were nights when even Leko wondered if he had made a mistake, but he never pulled out. He believed that sometimes the greatest treasures were hidden in places people ignored. Then, almost suddenly, everything changed. The company's app became a global sensation. Investors poured in, and the startup grew into one of the fastest rising tech firms. When it went public, the shares Leko had bought with his little savings turned into a fortune. Overnight, his stake was worth over $19 million. But Leko told no one. Not his parents, not Amira, not even his closest friends. He lived simply, dressing modestly, keeping the same quiet face everyone was used to. People thought he was still the struggling sibling, the one who always needed pity. And that was exactly what he wanted. He wanted to see who truly cared for him without the glow of wealth. At family gatherings, when they mocked him for not having success, he only smiled. When Amira bragged about Motsi's businesses, he nodded politely. Deep inside, he carried a powerful secret, one that could change the entire balance of respect in the family. Every insult they threw at him became a test he let them fail. He wanted to know if love and respect would ever come without a price tag. And when it didn't, when all they offered him was humiliation, Leko knew he was right to stay silent. Because when the time came, that hidden stake would not only lift him, it would show them the truth they had always refused to see. Amira's birthday was the biggest event of the year. The hall sparkled with golden lights, the tables overflowed with food, and expensive cars filled the parking lot. Guests arrived in designer clothes, eager to celebrate with Amira and Motsi, the couple everyone praised as powerful and rich. When Leko walked in, his simple shirt and worn shoes stood out immediately. He had saved up just to buy a small gift, but compared to the diamond necklaces and luxury bags others carried, it looked almost laughable. As he stepped into the hall, he could feel eyes turning toward him. Guests leaned close to whisper, some covering their mouths as they chuckled. "Why is he even here?" one woman muttered. Another man smirked. "Maybe he came to serve drinks." Leko lowered his gaze, clutching his small gift tighter. He told himself he had come to honor his sister, not to impress anyone. But Motsi was not about to let the night pass quietly. Standing tall in his expensive suit, he looked at Leko from head to toe and laughed loudly. "Ah, our family decoration has arrived," he said, making sure the whole hall heard. "Tell me, Leko, did you come to eat or to beg?" The crowd burst into laughter. Even Amira smiled awkwardly, not once stepping in to defend her brother. Leko tried to stay calm, but the mocking grew worse. Someone joked that he looked like one of the waiters. Another suggested he should be outside parking cars. The words cut deep, but what broke him most was the sight of his parents. Instead of standing by his side, they turned their faces away, pretending not to know him. In that moment, he realized he truly had no one. Then came the final blow. Motsi, with a cold smile, placed a hand on Leko's shoulder and said loudly, "You are useless. You bring nothing but shame. Get out of my party." Before Leko could speak, two security men grabbed him and pushed him out into the cold night air. His gift dropped to the ground, crushed under someone's shoe as the doors closed behind him. Standing outside, humiliated and alone, Leko felt his heart shatter. That night was not just a party. It was the moment his family buried him in disgrace. But deep inside, something stronger than pain began to rise. The night air was sharp against Leko's skin as he stood outside the glittering hall, the sound of laughter still echoing from within. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of humiliation. He had just been thrown out like a beggar, his parents turning their faces away, his sister watching in silence, and Motsi's voice ringing in his ears. Useless. For a moment, his chest tightened with grief, and tears slid down his cheeks. He had spent his whole life trying to find a place in his family, But tonight proved once and for all that there was no place for him. But as the minutes passed, something inside him shifted. The shame that had crushed him seconds earlier began to harden into resolve. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand, his expression changing from broken to steady. If they wanted to see him as useless, then he would show them the strength they had overlooked all these years. He took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his phone, not to call and plead for respect, but to set something powerful in motion. His lawyer's voice came through quickly. "Leko, is everything all right?" But Leko's tone was calm, almost cold. "It's time," he said. "Initiate the transfer. I want the shares moved. Start tonight." Those shares were not just numbers on paper. They were a controlling piece tied directly to one of Matzi's largest partnerships, a deal that kept his empire steady. Leko had remained silent about it for years, watching quietly as Matzi flaunted his wealth and mocked him. But now that silence ended. The lawyer hesitated. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" Leko's eyes lingered on the bright hall doors where he had been thrown out minutes earlier. He could still hear the faint sound of music and cheers, all at his expense. His jaw tightened. Yes. Tonight. No di less. As he hung up the phone, a strange calm washed over him. He was no longer the forgotten brother standing outside in shame. He was a man about to shift the ground beneath their feet. The night that broke him had also awakened him. And with one call, he had already begun to write a new story, one that would make them all remember the name they tried to erase. The morning after the party, the city woke up to shocking news. On every business channel and newspaper headline, one name appeared again and again: Leko. Overnight, he had sold his $19 million stake in a joint venture that was directly tied to Matzi's company. What seemed like a quiet move from an unknown investor became the spark that shook the entire foundation of Matzi's empire. Investors panicked as soon as the information went public. The joint venture had been the backbone of Matzi's operations, the deal that gave his company stability and trust in the market. Without Leko's stake, confidence crumbled. Stocks dropped faster than anyone could imagine. Phones in Matzi's office rang nonstop as frightened shareholders demanded answers. Some threatened to withdraw completely. Others rushed to sell their shares before the collapse grew worse. By noon, the once proud businessman who had laughed at his brother the night before was now pacing in his office, his face pale, his voice shaky. His advisors brought reports that millions were being lost every hour. Clients who had trusted him now questioned his strength. The image of Matzi as an untouchable figure began to crack. Meanwhile, the same family that had turned their backs on Leko sat in silence as they watched the news. Their Jules' husband, the man they worshipped, was suddenly on the edge of ruin. They didn't understand how it was possible until whispers spread that the mysterious shareholder who had pulled out was none other than Leko, the same useless son they had rejected. Matzi tried to reach out, calling contacts, arranging emergency meetings, but nothing could stop the wave of panic. Without Leko's support, the market saw weakness. And weakness in business was poison. His name, once praised, was now being spoken with doubt. People who once wanted to be close to him were stepping away, afraid to sync with him. For Leko, it was not about revenge with fire or anger. It was a single move, quiet but powerful, that revealed the truth. The brother they had mocked and thrown out of a party had the power to shake their world in one night. The empire built on pride was now trembling, and the earthquake had only just begun. The news spread like fire, and by the afternoon, Leko's phone would not stop buzzing. The same relatives who had laughed at his simple clothes and whispered behind his back were now calling one after the other. Their voices, once filled with mockery, were suddenly soft and desperate. They asked how he was, if he was doing well, pretending to care about him in ways they never had before. But beneath their words, Leko could hear the truth. They were afraid. Afraid of what his decision meant for Matzi's company, and afraid of how quickly everything could fall apart without him. Amira herself called, her voice shaking with worry. Gone was the proud sister who smiled as her husband mocked him. "Leko, please," she whispered. "Don't do this. You know we're family. Can we sit down and talk? Maybe you can reverse the decision. Matzi just needs time to fix things." Her words came quickly, filled with the kind of respect she had never shown him before. But to Leko, it was not respect. It was fear disguised as love. Even their parents, who had once turned their faces away in shame, suddenly remembered he was their son. They showed up at his small apartment uninvited, their voices trembling. "Leko, you cannot let anger destroy us," his father said, his tone unusually gentle. "Family should stick together. We may have made mistakes, but blood is blood. Help your sister. Help us." His mother, who once never defended him, clutched his hand tightly, begging him to reconsider. For a moment, Leko looked at them and wondered if this was the love he had longed for as a child. But deep inside he knew better. They did not come because they cared for him. They came because he now held power, and for the first time in their lives, they needed him more than he needed them. The tables had turned. The voices that once crushed his spirit now trembled before him. The hands that once pushed him away now reached out for mercy. And as he sat quietly listening to their pleas, Leko realized that the pain of being unwanted had given birth to something stronger than revenge. It had given him the chance to finally decide his worth on his own terms. The press conference was supposed to be Motsi's chance to calm the storm. The hall was filled with reporters, flashing cameras, and nervous investors waiting for reassurance. He stood at the podium, dressed in his finest suit, speaking with a forced smile about stability and trust. But beneath his words, everyone could sense the cracks. The company was trembling, and confidence was slipping away fast. Then, just as Motsi tried to convince the crowd that everything was under control, the doors at the back of the hall opened. All heads turned as Leko walked in, dressed simply but carrying himself with a calm confidence that silenced the room. For years he had been invisible, ignored and mocked. Now in this moment, all eyes were on him. He walked straight to the front, his steps steady, and the whispers began to spread. Who was this man? The cameras suddenly followed. When Leko reached the microphone, Motsi's face drained of color. No one had expected him to appear, least of all his brother-in-law. The reporters leaned forward eagerly, sensing that something big was about to unfold. Leko's voice was steady as he spoke. "Good morning. My name is Leko. Some of you may not know me, but for years, I was a silent investor in this company's joint venture. The very foundation that held this empire together rested on shares I owned. Shares that I have now sold." Gasps filled the hall, and the clicking of cameras grew louder. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then he added, "Last night, I was called useless in front of my own family. But today, you see the truth. The future of this company was tied to someone they dismissed, someone they mocked. And now, that truth has consequences." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, investors whispered in panic, and Motsi stood frozen, unable to respond. The image of power he had built for years was collapsing in front of the world. Leko did not raise his voice or show anger. He simply stepped back from the microphone with quiet dignity, leaving his words to echo in the hall. For the first time, the world saw not the shadowed sibling, but the man who had the power to shake an empire with calm truth. And nothing stung more than knowing the one they had called useless had been the key all along. After the press conference, the family could no longer hide their shame. That evening, Amira and their parents came to see Leko in private. The same people who once looked through him as if he didn't exist now sat across from him, their faces heavy with guilt and fear. Amira's eyes were swollen from crying, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "Leko," she whispered, "why did you do this? You've destroyed everything. We are family. Couldn't you have thought of us first?" Their parents quickly joined in, trying to soften the moment. His mother reached for his hand, her eyes pleading. "Son, we know we've made mistakes. But this is not the way. You've shown your point. Now stop before it goes too far." His father nodded in agreement, his proud tone gone. "Respect should not be about money, Leko. You've embarrassed us enough. Let us fix this together as a family." Leko sat quietly for a long time, listening to every word. He didn't shout, he didn't curse, and he didn't let anger control him. Instead, he looked at them calmly, his voice steady when he finally spoke. "You're right about one thing. Respect should not be about money. But all my life, you made it so. You gave it to Amira because of her beauty, to Motsi because of his wealth, and you left me in the shadows because I had nothing. You forced me to show you who I really am." His words were not loud, but they cut deeper than any anger could. Amira dropped her gaze to the floor, unable to meet his eyes. Their parents sat in silence, their excuses fading into nothing. For the first time, they truly saw the son they had overlooked for years, not weak, not broken, but but strong in his quiet dignity. Leko did not promise reconciliation, nor did he threaten revenge. He simply stood, leaving them with the truth they had always refused to accept. The silence in the room was heavier than any argument. They had wanted to control him with shame, but now they were the ones trapped by regret. And as Leko walked away, they knew nothing would ever return to the way it once was. The hall that once carried his humiliation now glowed with a different light. Months after the storm, Leko returned, not as the forgotten brother mocked by whispers, but as the host of a grand charity event funded by his new partners. The same walls that echoed with laughter at his pain now echoed with applause for his strength. Guests from across the city filled the room, not to celebrate Amira or Matsi, but to honor Leko, the man who had turned rejection into power and pain into purpose. He moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, dressed simply yet commanding more respect than Matsi ever had in his finest suit. People who once overlooked him now shook his hand eagerly, thanking him for his generosity and vision. The boy who had once stood in the corner unnoticed now stood at the center, his presence impossible to ignore. At the peak of the evening, Leko raised his glass. The room fell silent, cameras flashing as everyone leaned in to hear his words. His voice carried calm but firm, reaching every corner of the hall. To every useless child ever overlooked, he said, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. May you find your worth, even if it means walking away from those who never saw it. The hall erupted in applause, cheers filling the air like thunder. Strangers clapped for him, partners smiled proudly, and friends celebrated the man who had risen from the ashes of rejection. But in the far corner of the room sat his parents, quiet and broken. They did not clap, they did not smile. Their heads were lowered, their hearts heavy with regret. They had once chosen pride over love, appearances over their own son, and now they were forced to watch him shine without them. Amira, too, sat in silence, her husband nowhere near the man he used to be, her own pride shattered. Leko did not look at them with anger, only with the calm strength of someone who no longer needed their approval. The same hall where he was cast out now stood as the stage of his triumph, and as the night ended, one truth remained clear. What they once called useless had become unforgettable.